What is going on, guys? Ultimate Deadpool here, back with another Marvel Legends figure review. So today we've got Iron Man Mark III, a different version than the one that you may have seen last time if I actually did a video on it. I don't actually remember doing a video on it last time. But we also have Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man from No Way Home, or at least a different version than the one that I'll eventually review in the future. So, without further ado, and ignore the pose that Andrew's in, I just wanted to see if he could actually do it. And to my surprise, he could. So, we're going to start off with Mark III first, and then we'll go on to Andrew Garfield. Alright, starting off with Iron Man Mark III, the granddaddy of the MCU. This is the suit that essentially started it all, although let's be honest now, it was technically the Mark II that started all of it. But I digress. So, this is a simplified version of the other version of the Mark III. We'll get that out. Well, we'll get it out here in just a minute. But this shares the mold of Iron Man Mark II. I reviewed Mark II on the channel. I know that before. I know that. This has no additional switch out pieces. With the original Mark III, you had a shield, and you also had the tank missiles that he uses to blow up the tank and then walk away like a badass. It's through that whole scene where he's completely silent and he says nothing. So you're missing these, but they don't actually have that removable panel on this particular one. And you also don't get the flip-up Tony Stark helmet as well. We'll come back to this here in a little bit. To make things easier, we'll refer to this version as the original and this version as the new one. So with the new one, the the repulsors are not painted. This is the old one, this is the new one. For some reason, Marvel Legends or Hasbro or whatever, they did not paint the arc reactor, and they didn't make it a peg port. We'll get to that here in a little bit as well. But it's okay. I'm never going to use the arc reactor like this. If I do use it, luckily the hands, the plastic that they used is the same color, so it's not going to be super jarring on camera. The gold, however, we'll come back to later. But for right now, all you need to know is that if you find this version at your local Target, Walmart, or whatever that's selling Marvel Legends, and you have the original one, yes, you can use the faceplate or the flip-up face on this Iron Man Mark III, and you can also use the other hands off of it as well because they are the exact same color. I plan on using drilling holes on these to make sure that you can actually use the blast effects that this comes with. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But for now, these work just fine if you're just using it as a standard Mark III. All you have to do is just simply slide the wrists out, put the new ones back on, call it a day. And he also comes with these. These are supposed to be his repulsor blasts. What happened to these? Alright, so this is what you get with this version of Mark III. And then this is what you get if you got the original Iron Man Mark II. And then that's what you got if you got the Iron Man Mark 85. Or Mark 85. I like the R85's ones just a little bit more than both of these. Because, yeah, these are cool, but this actually has, like, frosted paint and stuff mixed in with the translucent rubbery style plastic to make it look like it's actually a, flame effect or, like some sort of blasting effect. Versus these, I love these ones. Don't get me wrong, I like the dark colored ones too. But clear, translucent, rubbery style plastic to me just doesn't make sense for Iron Man to be using as a blast effect because 9 times out of 10, his blast effects are either yellow or blue because that's what the color of the arc reactors and stuff are. And obviously his repulsors are also blue as well. So I don't know why they didn't just throw these in. But what's even stranger is you can't use the blast effects for his hands, which are what they're intended for. You can only use them on his boots. So it's like he's supposed to be flying with them. There's no stand. You can't have this guy posed like he's flying because A, they don't give you enough blast effects for that, because with that you have to have 2 on the feet and then 2 in the hands. Which is why I have 4 of these set aside in a tub, so that way if I ever need Iron Man to be in flight, I can just plug 2 on his feet, plug 2 in his hands, and then the effect is complete. Or the Mark 85 or Mark 46, one of the two, came with these. You plug those in. You can't tell me the blue doesn't look better. Either version of the blue looks better than whatever the hell they decided to do with the clear stuff. I do not understand why Hasbro, Marvel Legends, whoever made this thing, did clear versions of these blast effects. At least tint the damn things blue if you're going to do that. But no, they did not. And they didn't even give you proper sculpted hands to where you could even plug them into his hands like he's doing a repulsor blast, because that's what this ring around it is supposed to represent. It's supposed to be here's like the discharge color, and then there's the beam coming out of the hand and whatnot. So it's like that's what it's supposed to look like. But you can't actually do that unless you drill a hole through his hand, which I fully intend to do later on, either after this video or during this video, because I'll show you how to do it. It's pretty easy and straightforward, and as long as you don't drill a hole straight through the freaking armor plate back here, you'll be fine. So in fact, let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so now that we have the drill, what you're going to want to do is simply pop Iron Man's hand off of its joint and plug the one you're fixing inside the wrist joint or arm. Now, there's 3 different drill bit sizes that you could use. I will, of course, tell you which one my preferred one is. You could possibly get away with an 1/8 inch drill bit, because if you compare it, they're relatively the same size as the peg. Don't do this one. I would not recommend, if you're going to use the same technique to like fix the feet to where they can stand on one of these like, NECA figure bases, then okay, fine. But, as you can see right now, that peg port is just fine sitting in there like that. And it's a relatively, sturdy connection. It's not going to fall off. So I would not use an 1/8 inch drill bit unless this is the only thing that you have and you really want to go ahead and get this stuff done whenever you're ready to do it. I would personally look at using either one of these two. Now this one is 7/64, so it's a lot smaller than an 1/8 inch. Or you could also get away with doing 3/32. We're going to use 3/32 because that is the smallest, and once you go to plug the blast effect in, it'll be super tight, and all you have to do is just simply rotate it, and the plastic will do the rest. So my preferred one is 7/64 if you're doing it for either the feet or the hands. But for this instance, we're going to do a little bit smaller and do 3/32. So that way everything is nice and tight and nice and secure, and everything is good to go. And this part is actually pretty straightforward. You just simply want to make sure that you get the bit right in the center of the arc reactor or the repulsor, and just very slowly, and then once you feel it, pull it out or reverse it, pull out the excess junk, check and make sure you haven't, you can go through the whole hand, as long as you don't go through the back armor plating, you're fine. And then all you have to do is just simply take your effect, Okay, I'm misplacing my own words. Use the 7/64. That's clearly the best one, the better one to use. The 330 seconds is actually too small. So let's do this again with the proper size. Just like that. Twist the effect in. And voila. Now you have a more accurate repulsor blast for your Marvel Legends Iron Man. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Technically, you can just remove one hand and then put the other one, the opposite side, into the same arm. But since we're going to go ahead and do it for both, might as well go ahead and just switch out both hands. Same scenario. Get your 7/64 drill bit. Line it up with the mold spot on the repulsor. And very slowly, just hollow it out. Once you feel it snag, go in reverse. Pull out those little excess strands. And then just simply rotate the blast effect into the hand. And voila. Now you can actually have Iron Man using his repulsor blasts the way he's supposed to, rather than only limiting yourself to having those blast effects just in his feet, especially if you don't have a flight stand to go with him. This, at least, or doing something like this, at least you can make use of the blast effects. And once they're in there, they're not really going to go anywhere unless you pull them out, because these outer pieces are two separate pieces. So if that makes sense, right there you can kind of see that you can actually, whoop, then that one goes flying. Okay, then, well, that sucks. These are obviously two separate things. So if you wanted to, you could actually just take off the individual effect and then go from there. I prefer to use the full effect because to me that just makes the most sense. But you could obviously do that as well, and then you can move it around. It's not going anywhere unless you actually, hell, you can rotate the entire hand 360 with just, the blast effect. So, and just like that, now you've upgraded your Iron Man with minimum damage to the actual figure if you don't go all the way through the hand. It looks like I went through all the way on the hand on this one, but not this one. So just take your time, go very slow, or if you're too young to use power tools, have an adult with you or have an adult do it for you. Anybody can do it. It just takes the proper size drill bit, and then once you have it exact, then you'll have a nice, tight, and secure fit, and you can have Iron Man then dual wielding his repulsors just like he's supposed to, making it more movie accurate rather than just limiting yourself to the stuff for his boots. So super easy. Anybody can do it. You just have to have the right drill bit for it. And like I said earlier, the best drill bit to use and make sure it's nice and tight is a 7/64. So as long as it says 7 and then /64, then you know you've got the right drill bit. Or at least the right drill bit size. It doesn't matter if it's meant for wood, metal, plastic, whatever. As long as it will drill, it will work. And as long as it's the same thread size as what I just said. So, super easy. Now that that's done and out of the way, let's go ahead and keep going with the rest of Iron Man. Oh, and by the way, once you actually have those blast effects in there, they literally just pop right in and out. Once it's tight enough to where once you put it in, the plastic itself will soften, and it actually stretches that peg port just enough to where it's nice and secure, but it's not like if you plug this in 100 million times or whatever, it's not like it's going to fall out. I've literally done this to every single one of my other Iron Mans that did not have blast effects for the hands or blast effect ports for the wrists, and I've not had any problems with them so far. So, and then just like that, you can pop them right out. And the only thing you really have to worry about are maybe some holes in the wrists like that. But if you don't do that, then you're going to be left with something like that, which looks like it was always meant to be there anyway. So, no big deal, no harm, no foul. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to put Iron Man back to stock with his closed fists and everything, and then we'll continue on with today's video. I hope this little trick helped you guys. If you have this guy in the if you guys have something like this and you want him to use his repulsors but you don't really know how to do it, I hope that does actually help you guys. Oh, and real quickly, just to kind of prove the point home just a little bit further, if you did want to take the, I guess you could say, star or whatever off of the blast effect, it'll look something like that. So if you wanted to use the blast effect but not have the little star movable piece in between, there's really nothing holding it together except for a small, thicker piece of plastic. Just simply slide it off, and then the effect will look something like that. I actually don't mind that. I might end up using that for this Iron Man Mark III. But I also like the original one as well. It's all the same. All you have to do is just remove this little star piece. Job done. Alright, now let's get down to paint. This guy is obviously painted with the gold sections. The red, however, is unpainted satin red plastic, which is fine, but they did this, and they did the same thing with this. But the gold, however, the gold is actually painted in a unique way versus what they did last time, or the first time around. This is the shade of gold that they chose originally. This is the shade of gold that they did this time around. I prefer this because this looks more movie accurate versus the Infinity Saga version. This is the Infinity Saga version. This is the regular everyday Marvel Legends Mark III. I like this one a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, this one was great, and I still like it. And nice thing about it is because this is the exact same mold as that original. If you don't care about the gold mist color, you can just simply pop it on, and that actually doesn't look that bad. And even on camera, you can't really tell a difference. Like even in person, you can tell like a small difference, but it's nothing like, it's not jumping out at me like it's super different. And for those of you who are like, oh, well, you have this one, are you going to get the other Mark III? Hell no. I am not getting the Marvel Legends Infinity Saga version of the Mark III, which is what this one started off as. We'll get to that here in a little bit, because all it comes with are 2 extra pieces. The tank rockets, and then the shield, and the flip-up faceplate. That's it. Everything else from head to toe is the exact same, with the exception of the paint for the gold parts on the body. Otherwise, everything else is almost identical, except for the arc reactor, which we'll touch upon here in a little bit as well. So, no. This can be my standard standalone Mark III. I think it looks better than the Infinity Saga one. I think it functions a little bit better. The only thing I would say is I wish that the repulsors on the other hands were painted. No big deal. I'm never going to use them like that anyway. That's why I had no problem going ahead and drilling those holes in earlier, so that way they were actually compatible with the blast effects or whatever that Iron Man can use. So, but if you wanted to do something like this, Walmart, Target, or whatever your local, toy store or whatever that has Marvel Legends stuff out, they might be carrying this, or just look it up on Amazon or something. Just look up standard Marvel Legends Mark III or something, or like Mark III 2.0 or something. I don't know exactly how you would describe this, and see if you can find a nice good one that's the same thing as this except super cheap. Because if you do the Infinity Saga version, it is like 75 on dollars for it, which is way too expensive for a Marvel Legends action figure of this ratio or status or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I like it, but still, and we'll come back to him in here in a little bit, but this one just looks more like the movie. And then obviously you can switch the heads relatively simply, just like that. And then boom. So I'm going to go ahead and use this with this Iron Man if he ever uses his the flip up visor thing. But otherwise, yeah, no, this is going to be my definitive Mark III. All of the joints and stuff are relatively sturdy, especially the ones in his knees. The ones in his shins, this one's a little loose, but nothing major. That could just be from mold degradation from how many times they've reused this mold. Because they first did it with Mark II, then they did it with Mark III, then they took away the removable forearm pieces, or at least piece, and then that was another mold, and then they reused it again for this one, plus if they did any other versions that I'm not aware of, they have used this mold several times. So, mold degradation could be a thing, but it does have nice stiff ratchet joints in his upper knee, but then for the lower one, it's just a friction joint, which is fine. It's going to eventually get super loose, but for now, it's fine. This one is a little bit more loose than what I would like. Nothing major, not figure breaking. If I really wanted to, I could probably shove in some, I don't know, maybe hot glue or something underneath that and lock it forward, because when Iron Man bends his leg, it bends like that anyway. It doesn't really do that because this is supposed to be part of the knee. So, food for thought if you wanted to go that route. Okay, so let's get the original Mark III out here. Ignore the fact that he's been painted, if you can do that, and ignore the pose that he's in. This suit of armor once started off life looking like this. Same helmet, same body, same legs, same shoulder pads, same everything. The only difference is I repainted it to look more like the Captain America Iron Man suit from way back in 2007, 2008, when the first Iron Man movie came out. This was a toy that they had all about and about, and it was by far one of my favorite toys to play with as a kid. Even though for some reason on mine they gave him two left hands, which is fine because I didn't care. But because the shield covered up the other hand on my original one, and I still have that somewhere. But he also came with this spring-loaded little missile thing, and the shield, obviously. But this Mark III did not come with that. I have since repainted it to look from this to this, and I only did that with a Mark III, not a Mark II, because I did not want to try and color match the reds. So I figured if I get one that's already red, then all I have to do is just do the silver and blue, and he has been like this. Whoop. Wow, rude. He has been like this ever since. So, and I am perfectly fine with that. He is not getting out of this pose anytime soon, unless I use him for the connected universe, which is extremely unlikely because I can't really bend him. He can move his arms and his legs a smidge, but his midsection I cannot move at all. Actually, he can. I'm just not going to because I don't want to destroy the paint that went in to making him look just like this. Because, like I said, this design or this color scheme was one of my favorite childhood toys growing up as a kid, and I'm not about to mess it up. Now, I mentioned the arc reactor earlier on this one. That is because with this one, it is a printed sticker. You can see the white, and then there's, on the outside of it is a feathered bit of blue. You can actually still see it, for the most part, on camera right there. Versus what they did with this one is it's just a plain white sticker, and then they added airbrush shading around the arc reactor to make it look like it's illuminated. I prefer this one. I prefer this arc reactor print over this one, but that's like the only minor thing that this one just does not work well with. And even the eyes. Now that I'm looking at it, this one has like a black line around the eyes versus this one did not have that. And again, I did not paint over anything on the eyes on this one. The eyes are completely stock on this guy. But I do remember that the black line for the mouth was in there, but the black lines for the eyes, they were not in there on this one. So this one, in terms of their helmets, actually has a little bit more detail than what this one does, just because it's got a black highlight around the eyes, just to give it some differentiation from the white for the eyes and then the gold for the faceplate. I actually do like that because it makes it look more like, you know, Iron Man did in the movie. So, and then these bracket pieces were the same color as this in the before I did everything to it, as were these chest bolts as well up here. They were all this gunmetal style color, but they have since been turned silver. And then on his boots, on this side, the bolts that hold the shoes together are painted on both sides in gunmetal, versus this one, however, they are not. They are unpainted red plastic. So if I wanted to, I could always just touch it with gunmetal, so that way everything matches, but it's on his feet. Nobody's going to see that, look at it that far. I think I'm going to just leave it alone. So standing side by side with each other, whoop, how rude. Standing side by side with each other, ignore the slight height difference. These are the exact same guy. I think it's because this one is standing at a funky angle, but from the tops of their heads, they are the exact same size because it's the exact same mold. I like this one a little bit better than this one. Don't get me wrong, when I first got this one and it was originally Iron Man Mark III, if I remember, I think I did do a video on it where I did talk about these switch out pieces that were only for one side. They didn't have it for both. They only had it for, I think it was the shield side. I think it was this one. Because if I remember correctly, it was this side that could come apart, and you just simply slid that piece out and then slid the new piece in. I didn't like that. I'm not a fan of stuff like that unless you do it for both sides to make it make sense. So that way, if you wanted to, you could have Iron Man with the tank missiles on this side, or you could have him with the tank missiles on this side, or you could have him with the shield on one side, or have it with the shield on the other. The Hot Toys one does have that, but that's also like, you know, twice this size. So that's understandable. But I just, this one was fine. I like the Infinity Saga version. I do like this one just a little bit better in terms of the color, the way that they highlighted some of the panels for the eyes and stuff. I like that. I do wish they had done the same, you know, black wash treatment that they did for the face and like the biceps and legs. Nothing major. And then if you want to go extra technical, these two are also mold mates with this guy, because they are actually molds of Iron Man Mark II. Ignore the fact that they both have gigantic blasters and cannons and shit on their shoulders. Because, again, just like I said with the Captain America Iron Man suit, these two were some of my favorite stuff growing up as a kid as well. Especially this one, the torpedo suit. I loved the torpedo suit growing up as a kid. It was arguably my favorite Iron Man non-suit that they ever had, or that they ever did. I think it was like part of the concept series that they did for the original Iron Man movie back when it first came out. And then this one, I believe, was the Stealth Operations suit. But let's be honest, it's frickin' War Machine. They just didn't want to call it War Machine. And this one has the unpainted silver and for the middle section, the legs, and the faceplate, as well as the biceps, versus that one is completely done up, as well as this one as well, with the exception of the legs and the wrists and the shoulder pads. And then this is what they are. Technically, these two have the same mold because they don't have the switch out gimmicks like the Mark III did. So technically, these three are the same mold, versus this one is slightly different, but overall, it's the same thing. Alrighty, now we've got Andrew Garfield from, technically, Spider-Man No Way Home, but let's be honest, you can also use him for Amazing Spider-Man 2, because it's the same freaking suit. I like this guy. But I don't love him. And there's two different reasons. There's two reasons for that. One, obviously, he does not come with an Andrew Garfield alternative head. But two, he doesn't come with a specific array of gestures, which we'll get into in just a minute. And I think his colors are a little brighter than they probably should be. Because Andrew's suit was by far the darkest in terms of color schemes, with the exception of Tom with his black and red suit at the end of No Way Home. But this is supposed to be Andrew Garfield based off of No Way Home. So, and for the most part, it's fine. It does what it's supposed to do. It looks just like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man from either Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man No Way Home. The only thing it doesn't come with is an Andrew Garfield head. That's because they did one that is exactly the same thing as this, except I think the blue is slightly darker and the red is slightly more muted. So it comes across as darker. And then that one came out with an alternative head. Then they also had the 3-pack with Tobey, Andrew, and Tom Holland. All of their new Spider-Man suits at the end of No Way Home. They had them as a 3-pack. And then those came with different hands and the alternative unmasked heads as well. So to try to save some both money in terms of remolding or reusing an old mold and repainting everything and whatnot, they just said, you know what, we're just going to do a simple, basic, everyday Spider-Man. And that's exactly what this guy could be used for. You don't have to use him as your Amazing Spider-Man. You can use him for comic book Spider-Man because he's got the big white bug eyes, the thick black web lines, which we'll come back to those in a little bit. And his spider symbol, yes, is Amazing Spider-Man specific, but who cares? And he's also got the texture on his suit as well. Very similar to how Tobey's was as well. And ignore the pose that Tobey's in. It's one of those things where I got him into this pose, and I'm so afraid that I wouldn't be able to get him back into that pose. So for now, he's just going to be staying like that, except for a later segment of this video, which I'm dreading because I don't want to pull him out of that pose. So, anyway, this version of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man comes with 4 hands, and that's it. 2 alternative gestures, which these were actually installed on him right out of the box. He's wearing the other alternative hands that he came with. He came with 2 whipping hands and 1 closed fist. We'll come back to that in a little bit. And then 1 stylized Spider-Man hand gesture that he was in the pose when at the start of this video. That's it. No web effects, no unmasked Peter Parker head, nothing. Why did Iron Man come with blast effects and Spider-Man didn't come with any web effects? I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. But hey, it's at least better than the web effect that the black-suited Peter Parker from Insomniac's Spider-Man Marvel Legends figure got, because he didn't even get hands to hold that. At least with this guy, he could maybe hold the hand or hold the web like that or whatnot with it. But this guy, Spider-Man, he came with nothing. So, okay. Closed fists. Why is there only 1? I understand what they were doing. I understand what they were trying to go for. So that way you could pull off that Spider-Man pose that I had him at the beginning of this video. But Spider-Man is supposed to be a character who can beat people up if he needs to. He doesn't usually go straight for fists. He always tries to kind of talk to the villains or whatever first, especially if it's somebody like, as much as I don't want to use this example, in Amazing Spider-Man 2, when he's talking to Electro, when Electro reaches Times Square, he doesn't start off punching. He tries to reason with Electro, say, hey, I understand you're scared, something's not right, and I get that, and then some guy fucks up, and then everything goes to shit, for lack of a better term. Even though I do love that Times Square sequence, that's the only redeeming thing about Amazing Spider-Man 2, with the exception of the death of Gwen Stacy at the end of the movie. But other than that, the rest of the movie for me just did not work. I understand there's a lot of people who really do like Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I would love to be on that camp. But in my opinion, the first movie was way better. I liked the suit a little bit better in the first movie because it was distinct to Andrew Garfield. We'll come back to the suit here in a little bit with this guy. But in my personal opinion, I like Amazing Spider-Man 1 better than Amazing Spider-Man 2. Because Amazing Spider-Man 2 was fine. I think it took too many liberties and just had really, really bold ideas that they kind of fell flat with. And some of the casting choices that they chose for it was just not really my preferred casting choices for those particular characters. Like David DeHaan as Harry Osborn. He did fine with what he had to work with. But I did not like his acting in that movie. Don't even get me started on Paul Giamatti's the Rhino, and then Jamie Foxx's Electro. I liked him so much better in No Way Home. But yeah. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So this version of Spider-Man 100% should have come with at least 2 closed fists. But for some reason, he did not. So yes, you could make it look like he's doing that, but that's not really a Spider-Man gesture, especially Andrew Garfield, who is arguably the most comedic version of Spider-Man, because Andrew Garfield just plays Spider-Man relatively well. I would still say that I prefer Tobey just because I grew up with Tobey Maguire. He was my first Spider-Man. But I have since come to respect Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and Tom Holland Spider-Man as much as I do like Tobey Maguire. But in my personal opinion, nobody can beat Tobey. So... But that's just my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me. I know there's a lot of people who say Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man, or Andrew Garfield was the best Spider-Man, or none of the Spider-Men were all that good, and they're waiting for a fourth Spider-Man. So, and I have actually heard those ones too. So, in my personal opinion, he should have at least come with 2 closed fists. No big deal. Or at least have matching gestures. So, like one for this side of this gesture on both sides, and then 2 closed fists at the same time. I get why they didn't do it. This version of Spider-Man is specifically supposed to be cheaper than the other one. That's why it does not come with an alternative head. It does not come with a whole lot of extra hands, and it does not come with any special effects because that would make it more expensive to make. Same thing with the Iron Man that we reviewed earlier. This version of Iron Man could have come with all these other things, but they did not do it for the sake of cost efficiency. They did not want to reuse these molds for that because then that would kind of devalue the other Mark III that they had, and they didn't want to do that because it sells for really decently on the aftermarket. But hands are now out of the way. He does, like I said, he does come with 2 web shooter hands. These are what he was actually using outside when I opened him out of his box. And then for the pose that I had him in earlier, I put him with 1 closed fist and then the other alternative hands. Web lines. Tobey has silver raised web lines. And his lenses are supposed to be gunmetal. For some reason, though, with Marvel Legends, they did the silver web lines, but they really screwed up the head on it. And then they did the black lines around lenses. With Andrew, however, it's all of the web lines are supposed to be gunmetal, and the spider is supposed to be black, and then the frames around the lenses are supposed to be black. The spider and the lenses are great, but the web lines are supposed to be a dark gunmetal, or like a light gunmetal style gray. No big deal. It's not going to bother me, but I know it might bother some other people. And I think there's too many web lines on Amazing Spider-Man 2's suit. That's why this suit is not my personal favorite. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I will always love Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, both his suit and his acting as Spider-Man, just because, again, that's what I grew up with. But the Spider-Man Brand New Day suit is a perfect example of why there can be too many web lines on a, or this is a perfect example of too many web lines on a Spider-Man outfit. If they had taken away half of the Spider-Man web lines on this suit, I think it would have looked a lot better than it does here. Just my personal opinion. You don't have to agree with me. But in my personal opinion, this amazing, like the boots. The boots are the perfect example of what I mean. These have the right amount of web lines versus from his hips up has way too many web lines except for his head. So I would go as far as saying his head, his shoulders, and his boots have the perfect amount of web lines. But the forearms and the biceps, the hands, and the midsection torso as well has way too many web lines because it just looks so busy. And I get it. It's supposed to be a big, vibrant suit and everything else. But I prefer Spider-Man to look a certain way. And that's just because Spider-Man is arguably one of my more favorite superheroes out of all of them. Just my opinion. That could just be a me thing. If you guys don't care, please let me know down in the comments below. But I will say, I will give Marvel Legends their props. I will give Hasbro their props. For the butterfly joint for his shoulder, they did paint more web lines underneath that would otherwise tuck in on both sides. Even this side, they went ahead and did the web lines underneath his shoulder. They did not have to do that. But they went ahead and did it anyway, so that way if you have him, falling like this or, web swinging or whatever, whatever pose you want to do, if you activate that butterfly joint, you will see more details tucked up underneath here. Same thing up here. If you bend the torso, you can see the ball joint kind of like right there. All the spider legs still continue up to the very top, as well as that other section. So that way, if you in fact do bend him that far backwards, or whatever, those lines do continue underneath it. And they do the same thing with the spider legs on the back. So, and then even on the bottom, they still have it going to a point like it's supposed to. But you obviously can't have him like that because then he looks like he's Spider Dad Bod or Dad Bod Spider-Man. But at least with that, then it looks a little bit more seamless. So I will give this figure its props. It does try to do something a little bit unique. And it does do something as best it can to make it look as nice and as seamless as possible. I will eventually get the other version of this Spider-Man, the one that does come with the Andrew Garfield switch-out head, and we'll review him, and we'll compare him with this guy a little bit in that video whenever it does come out. But I will say, in terms of accuracy, from what I remember from both Spider-Man No Way Home and Amazing Spider-Man 2, the web lines were gunmetal or like a slightly dark silver. And then the spider logo and his eye lenses were also black. So that's at least accurate. So let's go ahead and do what I'm sure everybody's waiting for. Alright, before we finish out today's video, you guys knew I had to do this. Ignore the fact that they're all using web whipping hands. They don't actually come with close or with proper pointing fingers. So web whipping hands were the closest thing I could find that simulated this as best as I could. And also ignore the fact that the tech suit is, falling over for one. But ignore the fact that the tech suit is even here. This is the only version of Tom Holland's Spider-Man I currently have right now. So he's kind of my stand-in for Tom Holland right now. So we have obviously Tom, Andrew, or Toby, Andrew, and Tom all standing around doing the closest thing I can do for a pointing gesture meme. So For those of you who wanted to see this work, this is as close as I can get it in this size. I do know the Hot Toys versions do have the actual pointing fingers, or at least one of them does. But it's close enough for what I can do. And that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it wasn't too boring either. And I also do hope that if you've got, like I did earlier, if you have the Iron Man repulsors, that you do want to include blast effects in them. I hope that my little tutorial earlier with that all helped. So, and I was worried for nothing. I was able to get Toby and stuff back into the poses relatively simply. So anyway, that's pretty much it for today's video. Thank you guys again for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And I will catch you guys all next time on Ultimate Deadpool. Peace out. You guys are awesome. I'll catch you guys all later. Bye.